Level up with the new AAA Commanders MVP membership. Get all the benefits of AAA plus exclusive experiences, discounts, and tickets. Already a AAA member? Upgrade for free or join today at AAA.com/Commanders. The Commanders are becoming historically bad. Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. Also, for you club members, before we get into this nonsense that happened out here at Northwest Stadium today, club members, no private Zooms this week. I don't know when I'm going to be doing it because I'll be over in Spain. The time difference makes it very hard. If I can do it, I will. Hopefully doing it at some point, but it's going to be difficult, so bear with me, and there will be no live stream this week as well because we'll be traveling, and then by the time Bram and I get over there, we'd have to be doing this at about 2:30 in the morning, and this week, do you really want us talking that late at night about what's been going on? I think we all could use a break. That's the Therapy Tuesday. We'll get back to that after the Miami game. Anyway, folks, like I said, the Commanders are becoming historically bad over this stretch. They just really, really dreadful. A 44-22 loss to Detroit. Big picture, there's a lot of issues, as you know, and the problem is where's the end? What's there's no end in sight to what's going on here. It's just become dreadful. Here is how bad it's been. They are one of three teams in the last 35 years to give up 20 or more points in 4 consecutive losses. So that's these guys, Miami in 2019, when they lost almost just about every game, including the 17-16 game to Washington, the Redskins down in Miami, then also Arizona in 2002. Also, it's the most points Washington has given up in actually, I'm going to go back too. It's the first time they've lost 4 straight by 20 plus that the team has lost by that much since 1954. Also, the most points they've given up in a 4-game stretch since 1954. This is really, really bad. And at least on offense, you can look at it and say, well, shoot, you don't have your starting quarterback, most important position in sports. You don't have 2 of your top 3 receivers. You have nobody who can threaten anybody really down the field. Understandable that they may only get 22 points against a pretty good defense. But what's gone on defensively is just inexcusable. And like I said, I don't know how they get out of this because they've tried to change things. They've tried to, and I know we'll get to that in a minute. I know exactly what you're thinking about. They have pared things down. You see the Joe Witt down on the sidelines today. You see coaches on the side holding up cards for certain calls, as the play gets signaled in or called or radioed in. And you see them holding up, cards for some sort of, whether it's coverage or whatever it is, you're seeing them hold it up. They're trying to help with all of that. They're trying to help the execution. It's just not working. And I think that's the tough part here is what is the next step? And listen, we all know what the next step could be if this doesn't get turned around, because at some point, if you, like we keep hearing, they have really good practices, and it is not translated to any sort of on-field success because it's funny because Quan Martin said it's something different every game, but the thing is it's almost the same thing every game because it's a mistake here, it's a mistake there, and the results look the same. I don't know, and this is something I want to go back and look at on Next Gen Stats to see the separation that some of those Detroit receivers were getting. It was unreal how wide open they were at times. This is when they've pared things down. That's the problem. This isn't about where the defensive coordinator is in the booth or on the field. There's so many deeper issues with what's going on with this defense, whether it's personnel or coaching, it's not working. And we know that. And that's the thing that they're going to have to decide. What is the number one thing here? Is it the personnel? Do they not have the players to not so much even in the right spots, but the right players at those spots? That, whether it's safety, whether it's corner, whether it's defensive line, linebacker, all over, folks, we know that. And so I think they're going to have to look at all that. I did ask Dan Quinn after the game if what you've changed this, you've changed this, you've changed this. They've changed a lot of things within the practice structure to try to help with this. And again, nothing has worked. And it's funny because people were asking some of the players after the game, like, was there an impact with Joe Witt on the sidelines? Like, they scored 44 points. They didn't force a punt. I don't think there was any impact. And so I think that's, it didn't work. And I don't know that anybody thought it was going to be this big change. Sometimes it could just be maybe a little detail here and there that you get out of that. But there are bigger problems. Like, you look at the pass rush. I'm looking at some of the cover stuff. Well, there's not much of a pass rush because their best pass rusher, Dorrance Armstrong, is out. But should that have crippled the entire pass rush? You still have, we've heard a lot about Kinlaw and Payne, and like those guys, and Johnny Newton. Johnny Newton has not ascended to where that you would have hoped he would be in his second year. But with Dorrance Armstrong, should losing one guy cripple your pass rush that much? Well, it has, because he was the one guy who was consistently getting home. I think the more he's out, the more you see what a good year he was having, and it was. But their pass rush, their pressure rate has gone from about like 45% to less than 18% now. And I don't know what it is. Like, I'll go back and look at it. Last week, it was like 45 down to 18 with his absence. I'm sure it's less than that because today they didn't put any pressure on it. Like, I'm watching Jamison Williams on his 14-yard touchdown pass. Well, he breaks across the middle against Samerstill. Tough guy to cover on that because a lot of speed, but there's zero pressure. The safety, I think in that case, Jonathan Jones had dropped back to safety, takes the tough angle. Jamison's outrunning Samerstill because he's just faster, and there's nothing else, but there's no pressure. And you saw that consistently. That's an issue. Like, this is something that has to get corrected in the offseason because you cannot go in there relying on one guy. And it's not like Dorrance Armstrong is Myles Garrett or Trey, Hendrickson, but he was having a good year. And for them, that mattered. But you can't put yourself when you're in a position where that's it, right? That's all you got. And that's where they're at right now. So that's got to be a top priority in the offseason. And we thought it was last offseason, and it wasn't fixed enough. Now, there's a long way to go with, but in terms of like, you get Kinlaw has had a pretty good year, but hasn't been good enough. Then, bring in Von Miller, but that was a late addition. And he's been fine. He needed to come in and be the closer, but there's nothing to close. Like, he's now got to come out and start because they are so thin at that position. And I think, they keep trying different things. Jalen Holmes wasn't up. You have Sheldon Day and you have Von Miller, but these are like minor changes that are going to do things. So I did ask Quinn, so what's the next step? Do you look at personnel changes? Do you look at staff changes? I think because they're going to Madrid, it's really hard to do anything with any of that, right? Well, personnel you could do, but with anything else, I think it's really hard to get to that point where they're going to do anything. You got to buy the following week. Like, you've got to show a lot better in Madrid you have to look like a competitive NFL team. I don't know that I've ever covered anything quite like this. I thought 2013 was bad, and it was. Like, listen, a couple of years ago was really bad, but those were the end of regimes. Those were, and I'll say this, a couple of years ago, they were more competitive than what we're seeing right now. And I think that's, to me, is the disappointing part. And I'm not going to discount the injuries because we've talked a lot about them. And I just brought up, like, if you have your listen, Detroit had a lot of injuries last year, but they had their offense together. So one side of the ball was healthy, the other was not. The problem this year is both sides are not healthy, but the defense, even when they were healthy, they weren't playing well enough. Commanders fans, this is for you. Level up with the brand new AAA Commanders MVP membership. You'll receive all the benefits of AAA, such as 24/7 roadside assistance, plus chances to win game tickets, access to exclusive team events and experiences, along with 15% off Commanders gear at the online pro shop. Already a AAA member? Add the Commanders MVP membership for free. Head to AAA.com/Commanders to upgrade or join the squad and put your fandom in drive. Folks, this is the wallet I had before Ridge. If you ever seen the show Seinfeld, George Costanza's wallet. When this was full, it kind of gave Costanza a run for its money. It could have doubled as a phone book, wasn't good for my back at all. Now, here's my wallet. A sleek new wallet from Ridge. It's a slim, modern design that can hold up to 12 cards, plus cash made with premium materials. All Ridge products have a lifetime warranty. You want one with the Commander's logo? You can get it. But Ridge is more than just wallets. This is one of my favorite toys. It's a magnetic wireless charger that is terrific. They have key cases where the keys fold inside. No matter the product, Ridge offers free shipping and a 99-day risk-free trial. For limited time, our listeners get 10% off at Ridge by using the code KEIM, K-E-I-M, at checkout. Head to ridge.com, use the code KEIM, and you're all set. After you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them our show sent you. Once again, 10% off at Ridge using the code KEIM. Go to ridge.com, use the code KEIM at checkout. You're all set. And then after that, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. Support the show. Let them know that we sent you. But if you could have at least one side of the ball, like the offense, and that you can get into shootouts and make it interesting, then you could say, okay, you could understand a little bit more, or you could, it'd just be a little bit different to take. But with no side of the ball, it's just really hard to make a case. Like, how can they be competitive in some of these games? Can you get McLaurin and Noah Brown back and then help there? And then what we've seen from Trey Burks, like I really like what we've seen from him, and I'm going to talk about him a little bit, but a lot more probably tomorrow for the Tuesday podcast, just because I think he was one of the bright spots. And at this point, if you're looking at like who could be part of the future, you'd have to be able to look at him and say, like, where does he fit in? So could be a really good pickup for them. And that's what we're going to be watching as we go forward, like guys like that. Who can be part of the future that matter? Can you see more from a Ben Sinnott? He had a touchdown catch today off of play action. We talked about that before the game, the other day, or on my 5 thoughts, that could be a way to get him more involved in the pass game. And it was a well-designed play. But tonight, I don't think you're going to want to hear about that because it just looks really bad. And again, I go back to 2013, and that year always comes up because it was coming off a really fun year in 2012. To me, 24 was a lot better because it was start to finish. 2012, they're 3-6. They won 7 in a row. And then there was the injury to end the season to Robert. So there was a lot. It starts bad, great, and then ends bad. Last year, it was just very good throughout the entire year. And then a tough ending in the championship game, but you got to the championship game. So, the expectations for this year were heightened. And in 2013, there were expectations there as well. I think I've told you this before, but I was talking to a coach on that staff a couple years after that season, and he said that he had told someone before the camp that it was going to be a really bad year. Like he said, we're going to be terrible. And they just kind of like, oh, you're just saying that because camp's starting. You're just saying that. Turns out, he's like, and these guys was like, no, I'm telling you, it's going to be really bad, because they knew behind the scenes all the stuff that was going on with Robert, with ownership. And then they also knew they couldn't improve a defense that needed improving. So they knew going in that it was going to be bad. And Robert coming off the ACL. So 2013, even though you went in there with expectations, I think when you look below the surface, okay, you understand more what happened and why it went wrong. This year, it's really hard to process. And I think that's what makes it so difficult to understand. Again, the injuries you have to look at this year. One of the number one factors will be injuries, but I don't think you want to just blow it off or just write it off to injuries, because I think if you do that, you're going to do yourself a disservice and perhaps overlook some things that, like I said, I think offensively, pass game, injuries, because you don't have Terry, you don't have Noah Brown, and Jaden's now missed 4 games now. So you don't have your top guys that made plays for you in 2024, Pro Bowl receiver, a quarterback who was offensive rookie of the year and mentioned as an MVP candidate going into this year. So when you lose that, that's different. They didn't lose the equivalent of that on defense. I'm not even sure who the equivalent of that is on defense, and maybe that's part of the problem, but they did lose some good players. But like I said, so if you can look at that, like offensively, I'd still go and say, you got to get another receiver. You want to get another playmaking tight end, because I think, with Zach Ertz, I admire what he's done, but at this point, for going into next year, it would be hard to see them going that route. And I think he can still be productive, but for what they need is going to be get a young tight end here that you can build around with Jaden moving forward. And then you can really kind of upgrade that offense and make that side of the ball really, really strong. Defensively, you cannot just dismiss it to injuries, because it's that's not the case. And I think that's the thing that they're going to have to look at hard is what is it that really is taking place? What is it that needs to happen? And I know you guys can tell me in your comments on YouTube or wherever what you think should happen. I have a feeling I know where it starts for you guys, but I don't think it's going to end there. I don't think and I don't think any evaluation should just end in one place because I think there's a lot going on. Listen, you can look at personnel that they brought in. Do they have the right players that bring in, right? You're going to have to replace Marshawn Lattimore. And if you notice today, Mikey Samuel still did not start on the outside. Like they still see him as an inside guy. Whether or not you do or anybody else does, that's how they see him. They started Jonathan Jones on the outside for that reason. Now that maybe they'll switch in some other games, but I still think like that's where he's probably going to end up being best. And it's funny on my pregame chat with some of the club members, one of them brought out shot at Dan. Dan brought this up to me. Just is he like if he's going to be your guy in the future at that spot? Keep him there. Let him continue to learn and grow at that position because there is a lot more to learn there for him because he had to bounce back and forth last year. So keep him in one spot and let him grow there. And I think, that's not a bad idea because I think even the offseason, if you put Sam still outside right now, that's not where his future is going to be, not in their eyes. And I think that's the key you have to keep. That's what you have to keep in mind here. So that's something to look. But again, like I said, you've got to be honest about where things are at with it. Don't just dismiss it to one thing or another. Look at everything because if you don't, it's not going to get solved. And it may be that this takes now like another year more than what we thought. Like I thought going into this year that you would need another good offseason to get to the level where you're going to the year say, hey, you should be more than just a playoff contender. You should be a division NFC East title contender, right? And that I thought it would take another. Maybe it takes another one where I still listen. We'll get into the offseason, but I don't think it's a hard fix to get back to being a playoff contender just because the health will help. And then a good offseason would help that as well. But it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of honest assessments with everything. So, and then, like I said, today was just also a day where they lost their cool at times. Now, we had Deron Payne getting ejected. That hasn't happened to me before. What Javon Kinlaw told us after the game was that Amon-Ra St. Brown hit Payne first. Now, St. Brown said that there was something after they had something after a play a couple plays ago, and that after the touchdown, he walked by Payne and said something. He said it wasn't crazy, and then Payne punched him. If you saw it better than me, we didn't get good replays on that, so I don't know. But that's what Kinlaw said. He's called it some bullshit because like he was upset about how it was called. Quan Martin got an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. He said that I got pulled to the ground and kicked in the nuts. And now I saw a replay of that, and there was a little bit, but it was on the extra point, went into the guy, gets pulled down, and it looks like he puts a little extra force on the player as he gets. So I don't know all what the ref saw there, but but he did get pulled to the ground for sure. So anyways, but that's the stuff that starts happening when you start losing things. Now, I don't think it's a sign that Dan Quinn has lost control here. I do think that players respect him. And that goes back to those years we were talking about a couple years ago in 2013. In those years at this point in time, when 13 is a little bit later, but you kind of knew there was going to be a coaching change because it just wasn't going well in those years. And especially like into December in 13, you knew Mike Shanahan was going to be out because there was just too much stuff behind the scenes going on and the losing was there. So you knew it was going to take place. This year, like they're sticking by, Quinn's going to be back next year and the staff is going to be, I don't know, the Quinn will be back next year. I don't know anything beyond that. So that way it's like a little bit different feeling that, well, there's not going to lead to that kind of seismic change. So you've got to figure it out with this group. And I think for Quinn, he's always got to be coaching mindful of not just like, hey, I've got to try and save my job this year. It's like, you've got to continue to establish what you want your program to be now and moving forward. And that's one thing Bobby Wagner talked about. Like he can't worry about the past. He's not looking at the future. He's looking at right now. And if you're Quinn, I think you have to say like, okay, it's about like, what players do you want? What players still need to be part of your program moving forward? And just like get the mindset and make sure the practice habits don't change. Like you've got to really work to be honest, like some of the hardest coaches you have to do will probably be during the week to keep them focused, to make sure that you're still taking the right approach and doing all the right things. Because when this season's over, now you got your eye on 26 and you've got to build off good habits. If you don't have the good habits, you're going to have a hard time building. And I think, that to me is one of the things that you have to look at as well. I will say Quinn, I think Quinn himself and the players are dumbfounded over what's going on because they are not even competitive. That is the surprising thing, is how non-competitive they are. Like shoot, since the second half of the Chiefs game to now, like they're not even in games. Commanders fans, this is for you. Level up with the brand new AAA Commanders MVP membership. You'll receive all the benefits of AAA, such as 24/7 roadside assistance, plus chances to win game tickets, access to exclusive team events and experiences, along with 15% off Commanders gear at the online pro shop. Already a AAA member? Add the Commanders MVP membership for free. Head to AAA.com/Commanders to upgrade or join the squad and put your fandom in drive. And they can't even get a lead early, because if they don't score on their first drive and if they don't get the first drive of the game and score, they're not going to take a lead because the other team's going to go down and score. And we just know it. Like these guys, last year we went from watching an offense that never punted to watching a defense that doesn't force punts. So it's just really, really bad. And so I think there's, Marcus Mariota, I think going to Spain will be good for them. Get into a new place, get around each other, and just be around each other. And is it going to turn their season around? I don't think so. But could it lead to something better? Maybe. They think it might. And Marcus Mariota said, like, one thing they have to do when they're there is figure out who they are and what their identity is. And I asked him, like, at this point in the year, how do you not know? And he doesn't have an answer for that. I don't think anybody does. I don't. But I know that they don't, because if you did, you'd have that. But that's what's disappointing, is that they haven't. There's not one thing you say, this is who they are. Last year, you knew by with the big plays, but it's also defense. They were physical. They are not physical this year. Now, that's one thing that Jeremy Chin added last year, right? That's for sure. Now, again, we've talked about Will Harris being out, but that was what Chin added. And you just don't see that this year out of this group. That's just not who they've been. But again, like, I think going to Spain should be good for them. And it's funny because I know, like, last year, the trip to Arizona was a big deal for them. They spent the whole week together and they felt like they really bonded and kind of came together. The only thing is, like, the difference then and now, and even with this one, like, they talked about wanting this week. They wanted the week in LA earlier this year. That was something they really wanted. But the way the schedule came out, it just wasn't going to be conducive to that. But this is so late in the year to try and capture some of that. But last year, though, the team was just different. You just felt something different from from OTAs through everything. It was just different. One of the most together teams I've ever covered by far. And then, like, that week in Arizona, Dan Quinn talked about how it kind of cemented the bond. But that bond was already there. And I think, like, that game in Cincinnati was indicative of that, what they went through to win that game and how they won that game. And then it moved into the momentum, carried in that week in Arizona, and it carried into that game. And then boom, that season took off. So this is about, really right now, what this week is about just salvaging something from your season. Can you go out there and maybe beat a bad Miami team coming off an upset win over Buffalo? How about that? And so can you go out there and salvage something? Because if you don't, you're staring at a really bleak December. And then for you guys, the draftniks, you're going to get what you want, which would be then a top 5 pick. And you either get a top 5 pick impact guy, or you trade back, and we're going to have 4 months in the offseason to discuss what they should do, because that's going to be the main topic for sure. But yeah, and it's funny because, like, I know with Spain, I know Quinn was talking about how he almost wishes they could go right now and just get over there just to get that process started. So I think for some ways they're feeling good. They like that they're going over there. And then, like, one thing Bobby Wagner said is, I think this is where you respect the veteran in their approach, that yes, they're going to Europe, they're going to Madrid, but you can't get caught up in the city because I don't even care what, if it's a great city or not, basically, but you're there to win a game. Like he wants to win a game. Will everybody take that approach? That's what we have to see. And again, I don't think this is about them quitting. I don't think it's about them not putting in the effort. I just don't think they're good. And I think that's the problem. Like that's the scary part here, especially on defense, is how much work needs to be done to get this turned around. Is it as simple as one move or two moves? I don't think so. So I think that's part of the problem here is exactly that. So, but if can you, again, offensively, you can get a couple guys back to be competitive, at least you can have a better finish and feel a little bit better about yourself going to the offseason. Because again, this is the group that's coming back. There's not 2 years ago, we knew there was going to be a lot of change. That is not as far as like the overall staff and all that. But that's not going to happen this time for sure. So, but man, it's going to be hard to do this, but at least like the offense was at least competitive. And I say that, and yet they still only got 22 points and just under 300 yards, but 22 points against a good defense, a really good defense. And with what they had isn't bad. Like you saw some good throws by Mariota. You saw, some decent play, a couple of nice catches by Samuel, a couple of good catches by Trey Burks. You had Sinnott with a touchdown catch. But this is where they're at. Like you need help from the defense to be able to do anything else beyond that. And they're just not there. And like I told you before the game, I thought there's going to be a lot more 2 and 3 tight end sets. They open up in the 3 tight end sets, use a lot of 2 tight end sets because that's where the talent is. But if you fall behind a lot, it just doesn't matter. So, man, I don't know, folks. It just looks really bad. And like, you look at some of these plays and like I watched like the Jahmyr Gibbs' first touchdown run, like it was at 14, 16 yards around the end. And you see Jacob Martin coming up field real fast. But then you get Daron Payne doubled and pushed inside and a huge gap is there. And then you don't have the speed on the corner to when he died, like Jones is going to, he's got to cover a guy coming out, and but then the guy goes to block him. So now you got to cover a gap, but the gap's so big, and then so where are you going to go? Then he bounces outside. You can't get him, and so then he had the 43-yard touchdown run where it looks like Luvu's trying to tell Savage to get outside a little bit more after a motion. Then the run goes around the end. Savage is blocked. Luvu kind of backpedals and gets blocked. And then Igbenogany gets kind of blocked by those two. So 2 guys took out 3. Boom, there he goes. Like that stuff keeps happening. On a 41-yard pass to Jameson Williams on the crosser, Igbenogany runs into Jeremy Reeves off the snap. So it's a crosser. He's not going to stay with him. He's probably going to get a catch anyways, but you're going to you keep the damage low because, if you at least, if you're with them, but you run into your teammate, that stuff keeps happening. And, just a lot of problems here, folks. And I don't know what to tell you. I think I'm out of words. So I'm just going to stop. I will be back on Tuesday with my second thoughts. I do fly out to Spain on Monday. So, again, I'll be doing coverage from Spain. I know you're looking forward to that. It's going to be great. So I will talk to you next time. Appreciate you tuning in. Again, I'll talk to you on Tuesday. Talk to you next time.